Let's jump right into this explainer. If you're sitting on an executive leadership team right now, you need to hear this. Consider this a strategic warning. Today, we're unpacking exactly why our most promising greenlit business cases are, well, secretly failing to deliver. You absolutely know this scenario, right? Someone walks in, presents a crisp slide deck, confident fonts, and a big, bold, green ROI number. Leadership nods, everyone leaves feeling great. But there's a massive, hidden cost that is derailing these initiatives before they even get off the ground, and it is entirely off our balance sheets.
We tend to approve those confident slide decks because, hey, the business case looked amazing on paper, but as the old saying goes, paper doesn't have a calendar. We look at the financials, we check the strategic alignment, but we completely forget the dimension of time. And your people? They definitely have calendars. We're essentially rubber stamping these initiatives without asking the single most practical question. Who is actually going to do this on a random Tuesday while juggling the mountain of work they already have on their plate?
Now, notice the stark contrast here between what's visible and what's invisible. In our portfolio reviews, we almost exclusively fixate on the visible financial budget. The ROI, the projected revenue, we approve that. But every single new initiative requires an invisible budget too. It needs leadership attention to unblock decisions, specialist time that literally cannot be delegated, and heavy coordination overhead. We quietly borrow all of this invisible bandwidth from the organization, but nobody ever signs a loan agreement.
So, we have to expose this silent assumption that's just hiding in plain sight. In every approved business case, there's this unwritten, completely unmodeled belief that the organization will just magically absorb the extra work. We assume our critically stretched leaders and specialists will somehow just fit it into their week. It's kind of like a relative who moves in temporarily, right? And eventually, their name is on the Wi-Fi. Nobody formally planned for it, but suddenly, they're consuming all your bandwidth.
We rely on this assumption because, well, for a while, it actually seems to work. People do manage to juggle it all. They stretch. We assume resources are elastic. And they are, right up until they keep snapping back and hitting someone in the face. When people finally snap, it doesn't usually look like a formal project rejection. It looks like delayed projects, degraded quality, and teams that suddenly tell you they're just a bit stretched right now.
And if you think this is just some theoretical problem, let's look at some hard data on AI implementation. A staggering 69% of AI initiatives in 2025 never even reached production. 69%! They are entirely stuck in the pilot phase. Why? Well, because the visible budget for the software was approved, sure, but the invisible budget required to actually integrate it into the business, completely ignored.
And that's not just a small margin of error. What you're seeing here represents a massive 42% gap between the expected and the actual usage of AI. When leadership sees numbers like this, the first instinct is usually to blame the technology or blame the project managers. But this proves that this isn't just an HR complaint about people being tired. No, it is a fundamental, strategic failure at the executive level. We're funding the purchase, but we are absolutely bankrupting the execution.
To put that into perspective, the reality of what it actually takes to succeed is staggering. Research recommends a 10x model-to-integration budget ratio just to make these new AI projects function, meaning for every single dollar you spend on the model itself, you need $10 of integration, onboarding, and coordination effort. Those hidden expenses easily rival the headline price of any initiative. If you aren't explicitly allocating resources for that 10x integration effort, I hate to say it, but your project is already dead on arrival.
Which brings us to the core concept we really need to embed into our executive vocabulary today. We need to talk about capacity debt. This is the invisible liability created when initiatives are co-funded by the unpaid, unallocated labor of an already busy workforce. The ROI on your slide deck might be positive, but the capacity debt is sitting entirely off your balance sheet. And as leaders, we have to treat this with the exact same gravity as a financial liability.
Notice the stark difference here. We scrutinize financial debt at the board level, right? It's visible, it has covenants, someone is held accountable for it, and there's strict repayment schedules. But capacity debt? It's completely invisible. We just let it accumulate quietly. It shows up as tired teams, decisions that drag out for weeks because the right people are overextended, and a really slow, painful degradation of quality. Usually, we only really notice it in exit interviews when our absolute best people finally leave.
Ignoring this debt just means the organization isn't actually moving fast. It's moving forward on credit. And just like any credit card, eventually that bill arrives. If you ask a CFO to add capacity debt to the balance sheet, they're going to tell you it isn't a recognized accounting standard. But, neither is the team will figure it out, and yet here we are. That is exactly how we're currently funding our most critical strategic growth. We are borrowing from our own people without any plan to pay them back.
This leads us to a pretty hard truth about our leadership meetings. Our portfolio governance is fundamentally asking the wrong question. Our current processes perfectly evaluate if a business case is attractive. We check the strategic fit, we check the financial return, we check the risk rating. But approving an initiative without creating the actual human capacity to execute it, that's the exact equivalent of booking a flight, packing your bags, and completely forgetting to arrange time off work.
This reality perfectly captures the tension in the boardroom. When the portfolio board asks if we have capacity for one more initiative, the honest answer really should be absolutely. Which of our current projects would you like to fail? Because when we decide to proceed with a great idea without explicitly freeing up the capacity for it, we aren't making a decision to proceed. We're making a decision to proceed badly. We're essentially guaranteeing that either this new project or an existing one is going to fail or suffer massive drops in quality.
So how do we actually fix this? Here's how we can overhaul our portfolio governance. We must treat human capacity as a hard resource that has to be explicitly allocated, not magically assumed. Number 1, make capacity visible. 2, explicitly ask what existing work must stop. 3, treat integration as a very real cost. 4, protect your best people, the ones whose bandwidth is always used as the hidden funding mechanism. And finally, number 5, recognize and pay down this capacity debt early, before it compounds into an absolute catastrophe.
For your very next business case, I want you to demand these actions. Better governance doesn't mean approving fewer things, it means approving them honestly. Force the sponsor to name the specific leadership required. Allocate the exact specialist input needed. Factor in the coordination overhead and, most importantly, demand a list of what existing work will be paused and who will be partially released to do this new work. Map it out exactly.
We absolutely must shift the executive mindset here. Every single new commitment displaces something else. It's just a law of organizational physics. Therefore, the governance question cannot simply be, should we do this, or is this a good idea? Look, good ideas are everywhere. The only question that actually matters at the executive table is, what are we willing to trade for it?
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with this final provocative thought to take into your next portfolio review. Which of your current, ongoing projects are you explicitly willing to trade for your next yes? The goal isn't to just say no to everything, but to say yes with enough honesty to actually ensure success. Because if you're in a room where nobody's asking about capacity, those ROI numbers on the screen might look incredibly green, but somewhere out there, a really good person is quietly paying for them.